this morning we will carry on with the opening and then move on. Right.
Coge la mía y entonces yo no hago ningún.
You may adjust my microphone.
Vamos a la toma de refugio. Voy por refugio hasta alcanzar la iluminación, al Buda, al Dharma y a la Asamblea Suprema. Por los méritos que acumule practicando la generosidad y demás perfecciones, que pueda obtener el estado de Buda para beneficiar a todos los seres. Voy por refugio hasta alcanzar la iluminación, al Buda, al Dharma y a la Asamblea Suprema. Por los méritos que acumule practicando la generosidad y demás perfecciones, que pueda obtener el estado de Buda para beneficiar a todos los seres. Voy por refugio hasta alcanzar la iluminación, al Buda, al Dharma y a la Asamblea Suprema. Por los méritos que acumule practicando la generosidad y demás perfecciones, que pueda obtener el estado de Buda para beneficiar a todos los seres. Vamos a la ofrenda de mandala.
So again, we are just going to this morning go through what we have already covered in the shamatha practice, and then the fourth Brahma Vihara, or immeasurable, which is even-mindedness, equanimity, or also impartiality. And then after the tea break, we will open it up for questions. So we recall what we have done so far with the shamatha. As I will just repeat the main points so you remember. But the idea is to make the mind into a worthy instrument to be used in the analysis of the mind, and through vipassana, insight meditation, and then also capable of transcending our ordinary conceptual mind to reach a level of genuine, pure, unborn awareness, the unconditioned that the Buddha talked about, which is our essential nature. we cannot do that if our mind is not well tamed. I mean, even if we get a glimpse, it's only a glimpse. We cannot sustain it. So therefore, it's like sometimes when people come to visit us in India, we have this very lovely temple, and people are very taken, with the gold roofs, but and the murals, the very beautifully painted murals in the temple. But I always say that this temple could not stand and endure if it were not for its foundations. We spent 1 or 2 years just digging foundations and putting in all the plumbing system. And nobody gets excited about foundations. Please come and look. Aren't they fantastic foundations? Have you ever seen anything so good? Really deep and solid. And they go, wow. No, nobody's interested in big holes. But without those solid foundations, the walls and the roof and which contain the frescoes could not endure. Many buildings in India, they look very lovely when they first built, but because they do not have strong foundations, within 5 years they look like slums. And the reason is because the care was not taken to, dig firm and really solid foundations on which that building is going to rest. So therefore, bodhicitta and shamatha are the foundations, our motivation. Why are we practicing? Not just for our own comfort and happiness, but in order that eventually we can really be of benefit to others. We will see. And so, therefore, in that way, there are so many more exotic and exciting practices to do than sitting watching the breath. But unless we know how to watch the breath, forget those exotic and exciting practices, we will never really be able to do them. And so, therefore, it's very important, just as I said, to tame the mind so that it is capable of being trained. So, however much time we have to put into this, it is really, eventually we will be grateful for that. It's not time wasted. The Buddha himself, of course, in the Pali Canon, emphasized not only just shamatha, but going into the various levels of mental absorption known as jhana. And again, he saw that as the foundation on which to build the path. And so he very much emphasized, if one looks at the early sutras, cultivating that strong basis in which the mind is very focused, very clear, very stable. And from that, as I say, like a very well-maintained instrument, machine, we can then go forward to accomplish everything else on the path. I mean, we know this with cars and with computers, etc. I mean, especially cars, you have to keep them well maintained, well oiled, looked after. If you don't, they're not going to run. And so, also with our mind, we have to get it well maintained. Then it can accomplish quite easily. But without that initial groundwork, like, musicians playing scales, they have to play and play and play. It's not exciting. but if they don't get that dexterity first, then how can they expect to play more difficult pieces? So we know this with outer things, but we are all very impatient when it comes to the mind. And people come up with all these wonderful, exciting techniques, and it all, promise Buddhahood in a snap of the fingers. And it all sounds very wonderful. But in actual fact, even though people might be doing very seemingly advanced practices, often when one looks at their everyday behavior, you think, well, where did that get them? Because, we are judged by our actions and also by our thoughts, So it is very worthwhile to spend time on just taming the mind, getting the mind to really cooperate with us. Because once the mind is able to cooperate, then the other practices are, relatively simple. Even the most complicated ones. If our minds are focused and clear and calm and inwardly strong, then there is nothing we cannot accomplish. But if our minds are distracted and weak and vacillating, then it's not going to work. So this is why also many people who have been doing in the West, advanced practices for many years are now going back to the basics again. Yes, now we know all the exciting, exotic practices. We also, with humility, recognize we can't do it. And so, okay, now we know what it's all out there. Let's go back to the start again. And for this reason now, SHAMATA, which for many, many years in the West was looked down on as unnecessary, has now been given a whole new lease of life. And many, many people now, including people who have been on the path for many, many years, are starting back again. Okay, let's get our mind in good shape first. And so shamatha and bodhicitta, because it opens up the heart and reminds us why we are bothering to practice, not just for our own benefit, but really to be able to be of service to the world.
So I have to make an announcement.
Yes.
There's a car blocking. Sí, hay en la iglesia. Just so that she knows. En la iglesia de la esquina hay un Infinity Gris y un Mazda Tribute, que el pastor vino acá a decirnos que por favor están bloqueando la iglesia. Un Infinity Gris y un Mazda Tribute, please. Si se parquearon en la esquina de la iglesia, muevan su carro. Gracias.
Nobody's standing up and rushing out? Oh, somebody's standing up and rushing out.
There's two cars.
Okay. So anyway, so for this reason now, many, a number of very eminent meditation teachers are focusing on exactly this, of really helping people to get the mind into a condition where we can practice. That's what shamatha is all about, is getting the mind ready to carry on with further practices if necessary. So remember, the aim therefore here is simply to get the mind, the surface mind, more quiet, which will happen automatically as our ability to be attentive and one-pointed increases. So this is why we are saying we don't have to try try to calm the mind automatically will calm of itself if our ability to be concentrated on a single point is developed and cultivated. The more conscious we become and attentive and single pointed, naturally the more the surface waves will calm down. So this basically is what shamatha is about. I mean, then when the surface waves really do begin to calm down, then one can go into deeper states of absorption if the outer circumstances, such as being in a very quiet, peaceful place, are maintained. But the most important thing for us is not to go at this time into deeper states of absorption, which make the mind very strong, very powerful. I mean, they're very useful, but most people don't have the time to develop that. But at least to have the ability to stay focused on a single point for a certain amount of time is indispensable before going on to really look into the mind and examine it, asking what is a thought, where do they come from, where do they stay, where do they depart to, who is thinking? Because thoughts appear and we know those thoughts, so who knows? And of course, if we say, well, I am thinking, then the great question, who am I? And look, see if we can find this I, like a spider in its web. You know, see, look. I mean, it's very important and when one reads the traditional texts, they ask many questions about the mind, but they don't give you the answers, which is very important. Because if we are already pre-programmed, we think we know. But we don't know. We just, the Lama so-and-so said so it must be true. That doesn't help. It doesn't transform anything. So they ask many questions, but they don't give you the answers. Because they're just saying, look, 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 examine. Find out for yourself. Only that will really lead to insight, not just learning all the questions and answers by heart. That doesn't lead to anything. So we will again go through what we did on yesterday and the day before. We'll sit for 15 minutes. So first we will do the practice of just very simply resting the mind. Keep the mind very relaxed. It's very important that we don't tense up the mind. This is a stress release. And meditation shouldn't be an added stress. You know, if we are finding that we feel more stressed out by the time we finished our session than we were to start with, we're doing something wrong. So even though we need to be focused and attentive, it's a very gentle focus. And the basic mind, I mean, it's very important to keep the basic mind spacious and relaxed. Relaxed, and then bring this awareness, this mindfulness, to rest on the ingoing and outgoing of the breath. We breathe, and simultaneously we know we are breathing. That's all. Nothing to do. Nothing to do except to breathe and know we are breathing. If the mind gets swept away again by our conceptual thinking, the moment we recognize it, just bring it back. No blame, no recriminations, no, oh, I can't do this, I'm always useless, I've never been able to do anything. Just recognize the mind is distracted, bring it back to the breath. The mind goes off, bring it back to the breath. That's all. Then, when the mind is a little settled and the concentration is ongoing, then, because we have to develop this quality of being able to observe, right? Which is not the thinking mind. We're dealing with two levels of consciousness here. There's the thinking mind, and then there's that which knows the thinking mind, right? So it's important, first we have to develop that sense of observation. So we use the breath because the breath is less subtle than the mind itself, and also because we're always breathing, and when we are conscious of the breath, we are in the present moment, since we cannot breathe in the past, we cannot breathe in the future. Only we can breathe now. If our mind is centered on the breath without commentary, then we are present. So then when the mind, the mindfulness is developed enough that it can stay on the breath for a certain amount of time. As I said, the Tibetans usually say 21 rounds of breath. You know, the breath is by this time fairly slow. If the consciousness, if the mindfulness is able to be with that breath for 21 rounds very comfortably, not being distracted, just being really settled on the breath. So there's a real sense of observing. Then, by that time, the background noise, the background chatter will have calmed down a bit, naturally. So then we turn the focus of our awareness away from the breath and turn it back in on itself. And then, as I say, like someone sitting on the banks of the river, we just sit there and observe the thoughts. We don't judge the thoughts, we don't try to stop them, we don't try to encourage them. We just look at them and recognize that the most exciting thoughts are still, they're like bubbles, you know, very bright and shiny, but plick, and they're empty. We make our thinking so solid, so real. We believe our thoughts. And from our thoughts come our speech and our actions. Why do people do the things they do? Because of a prior thought. Even if it's very quick, it's there. The intention is there. So it's very important that we become increasingly aware of our whole thinking process, which we normally don't examine, even though we are, as I said, swimming in an ocean of thought the whole time. But we don't look at that thought or ask ourselves, what is a thought? So therefore, it is very important to learn how to observe the thinking and how to really see we are not our thoughts. We can use our thoughts. Thoughts are very useful, but it is not who we really are. It is an instrument which is very useful, that's all. And to identify ourselves completely with our thinking and with our emotions and our thoughts, our memories, our ideas, our opinions, and so forth, is thinking this is who I am, as something very static, very solid, very enduring, and very separate from everyone else who is non-me. This in Buddhism is regarded as our fundamental delusion, and is why the Buddha separated our sense of this small self that we have always into the 5 constituent parts of, form and perceptions, sensations, and so forth. In order that when we look at it, we see that it's not a solid entity at all. That it all comes up due to causes and conditions, and then falls away again immediately. It's moment to moment to moment. You can't catch anything there and say, this is me, because the minute you say this is me, it's already changed. It's a river. But to say that is one thing. To actually experience it is something else. And so meditation really is about gaining this insight, this understanding of what's really going on in there. And eventually, to really come back to who we truly are and stop always grasping and clinging to what is basically a false identity. That's why it's called release. That's why it's called liberation. What are we being liberated from? What are we being freed from? We're being freed from this very small little mind which is stuck in our heads and is like a rat running around in a cage. And it's so painful. Because we think that this is who we really are, this trapped rodent. And that's not who we really are at all. But we cannot know that until we really look. So, we have been focusing on the breath. Then, when our focus is clear, we turn it onto the mind. We watch the mind going past. We recognize these are thoughts coming up like bubbles. They come up, they go away, they come up, they go away. Wonderful, but not me. Something else is watching. And then, after a while, just drop the whole thing. Once one is capable of being aware of the thoughts, then one can just drop the observing and just observe the observer. In other words, one doesn't do anything, one just is. Normally we're using the mind for something. And even if we are observing the mind, still, there is that tension between observing and observed. But now we're dropping everything and just being. Nothing to do. Just to be aware and to know that we're aware. That's all. I mean, there's nothing to be aware of, just that experience of awareness, which is very fundamental. It's like sometimes in the Nyingma, they usually practice with wide open eyes, and what they're looking at is space. Because normally, as I said yesterday, when we look at something, we look at the objects. We don't look at the space. So they have a practice where you just look at space. And so this is what we're trying to do internally. Normally, of course, we are always aware, but we're so busy with our thoughts that we're not even conscious of being conscious. So now we are looking at space. Now we are looking at the consciousness itself. Okay? Everybody got it? Good. So we'll sit for 15 minutes. No pressure. If you cannot go beyond watching the breath, that's absolutely fine. But this is just an overview. Please go home and do it, in your own time. This is just to go through the stages so that you can go back and practice by yourself. we come to the last of the four illimitables, or the Brahma Viharas, which is that of upeksha in Sanskrit, equanimity, even-mindedness, impartiality. It is described in various ways. In some contexts, it's placed at the beginning. So you start with learning how to be more even-minded, and then go into loving kindness and compassion and empathetic joy. But the way the Tibetans also recite it, actually, it comes at the end. So all these qualities of wishing well-being for others, having compassion for others, and so forth, are rooted in the idea that we feel like that towards everyone. And it is not a matter of being especially partial to those who we are related to or are our friends. We want them to be happy and free from suffering, but everybody else we could care less, and our enemies, if they're miserable, we're happy. So it's dealing with this whole question of everybody has a relationship with us, even if not in this lifetime, then in past lifetimes. We've all been related at some point. And so just as the relations and those close to us in this lifetime, we wish them well, and we are very unhappy if they are unhappy, likewise, we should have that kind of mindset for everybody. But this, for human beings, is quite challenging, because we tend to get caught up not only in the people that are close to us in this lifetime, but with our nation, with our race, with all sorts of religious affiliations and so forth. We want that goodness and happiness for that lot, that our particular team we're rooting for, and we could care less about anybody else. So this even-mindedness is a very important quality, to recognize that everybody in their heart of hearts wants to be happy and does not want to suffer. I mean, sometimes people do things for themselves and for others which are extremely self-destructive, but at the core it's because somehow they feel it's going to make them feel better to do that. And so everybody in their heart wants happiness, doesn't want to suffer. Not just human beings, but animals, fish, birds, insects. We share this. It's something which is common to us all, that we, desire pleasure and we do not want pain. And so recognizing that in everyone, so that we recognize that deeper level of empathy with all beings, that the one thing we have in common is that we would rather be happy than be sad. And therefore, just as we would wish that for ourselves and for those that we care for, likewise we should wish that for all beings. And along with that, this sense of even-mindedness has to do with the ups and downs of daily life, that we keep a kind of equanimity. The waves of life go up, the waves of life come down, because this is samsara, and samsara is described as an ocean, right? It's sometimes a wheel, but often it's described as the ocean of samsara, because just like an ocean, it has waves. So this is very good for Puerto Ricans. You understand immediately. Tibetans have never seen an ocean. Do you recognize? And when there was that huge tsunami disaster in 2004, or whenever it was, we asked the nuns to do prayers, and explained, these huge waves had caused such absolute disaster. It was actually um, the most disastrous disaster in human history. Anyway, we asked the nuns to do prayers. And then they came and said, well, we don't really know what we're praying for. Because all they've seen is lakes with little waves lapping, what? And so fortunately we had a book on world disasters, like, chapters on earthquakes and volcanoes and hurricanes and so forth. And it with pictures. And it had a chapter on tsunami. I'd never heard tsunami until this tsunami happened. But it had an actual chapter on tsunami with these pictures of these huge waves and little cars. And so all the nuns went, and rushed off and prayed very hard, So, so samsara is an ocean with big waves. And the waves go up and the waves go down. And the Dharma is sometimes described as a boat. It is, the waves are still going up and down, but we're riding them. We're not submerged in them anymore. This is the difference. Normally, if we don't have a boat to protect us, then, we're just tossed up and down on these waves. But with a boat, then, you go up and down, but you're not anymore submerged. There was this very nice T-shirt in Malaysia, which had a picture of big waves, and on top of the waves was a surfboard, and on top of the surfboard was someone sitting in meditation. And the slogan said, "Riding the waves of life, be mindful, be happy." Great T-shirt. So this is what we need to do. We are not, we have not overcome the waves, but we are riding the waves. We are not endlessly tossed up and down on the waves. We have this quality of equanimity, so that even though the waves come, like a surfer, once you get expert, the bigger the waves, the more the thrill. We're not trying to stop the waves, but we're riding those waves. Because those waves going up, those waves coming down, we learn so much. Right? But it's very important first to get your surfboard. And so, therefore, this is what mindfulness is for. To give us that inner center, that inner ability to ride the waves instead of being totally pummeled by the waves the whole time and bruised and beaten up by the waves. So this quality of equanimity is a very important quality. It doesn't mean that we just become bland, but it means that whatever happens to us, we keep our inner centeredness, we keep our awareness, we are not tossed up and down helplessly like a Coca-Cola can or something, just tossed up and then pulled down and tossed up again. It's not like that. Now we have that poise, that dignity, that we are able to ride the waves of life. I mean, a surfing analogy is not bad, because also surfers are very in the present, very aware, very relaxed, but at the same time totally present. And so that is a good analogy for the kind of mind we are trying to develop, which is totally alive in that moment and present and aware, but relaxed. So this quality is a very important one to develop in our life as much as possible. That whatever happens to us, we are able to take it on the path, as we were discussing yesterday. It's very important that nothing is discarded. Everything is made use of. Because, otherwise we tend to think that we can only practice in certain very specific circumstances, and when everything falls apart, then we can't practice anymore. Our whole mind goes, chum, what happened to the Dharma? We're fair weather practitioners. When the storms come, then we fall apart, we can't deal with it. That isn't practice. It's very important to recognize that the storms are a very important part of the practice, and that everything can teach us. The whole of life experience is like a schoolhouse. We are not here to make samsara more comfortable. This is the problem with modern day spirituality. That it's a subtle effort, or not so subtle effort, to basically make yourself feel better in samsara. And that's not the point. That is not the point. So this quality of inner equanimity is based really on our ability to be conscious, to be aware, to be mindful. Because then, as I said before, it also gives us the opportunity to pause before responding. So many of our problems are because we didn't pause to think. We just responded, and those responses coming from a very negative part of the psyche create a lot of problems. If we stopped and could assess the situation, then we could have more opportunity to respond skillfully, until finally, of course, if we are really in contact with our true nature, then the response will come spontaneously, but at the same time be naturally very skillful, because it's coming from a much deeper source of our being than our ordinary conceptual thinking mind, which is full of pollutions. So first we have to recognize the pollutions of the mind and how they create a lot of problems for us. And when we recognize these poisons, we look for an antidote. We recognize it. We say, well, that is anger, that is greed, that is envy. Okay, now what? Let's deal with that. And then we don't get all fussed up about it, I mean, people often enjoy just being in a state of, mild hysteria. And this is not the point. So get the mind quiet. As the mind becomes quietened down and our equanimity becomes stronger, then, as I say, it's like the surface of a lake. It becomes, much more clear, and it reflects more accurately like a mirror. I have this book called Reflections on a Mountain Lake. And the original photo was taken in Tibet when we were there. And it actually is a very nice photo, because it does reflect exactly that. The whole photo is the mountain, the lake, and the reflection. And it's so clear that you could put it upside down, and it's hard to tell which is the actual reflection, which is the actual image. But the publishers cut it off, so you can't see that, so the whole point is lost. Publishers You know, and you know, they are paid to design the cover, and we gave them this very beautiful, exactly what we're talking about, image, and then they blew it. So, but one sees that in a lake, you know, which is completely tranquil because there are no winds blowing on it, that it becomes like a mirror. And so this is a very good synonym for the mind, which is calm, because then not only does it become more clear, but it reflects more accurately the seeming external phenomena. So we see situations much more clearly without the ego being stuck right in the middle, distorting everything with our greed and our anger and our envy and pride and so forth. We see things as they really are and not how we distort it in our perception. So therefore this quality of even-mindedness, of being very calm and impartial, and recognizing that all beings wish for happiness, all beings would rather avoid suffering, is a very important quality that we need our everyday life to develop. I mean, it's one thing when we are in retreat, you know, everything nice, quiet, everybody in silence, you know, then of course our mind becomes very equanimous, and look how beautifully we're practicing. Little bodhisattvas. And then retreat finishes, we go home. And then we have to face our family and our colleagues and, you know, the neighbors and life in general. And kapoof, I mean, it's like, really, it's like a bubble that suddenly pricks, and what happened to all our equanimity and loving kindness and so forth. So it's very important to therefore develop and really try to cultivate in our daily life this ability, first of all, to recognize that everybody wants happiness. Who does not? And also that samsara is an ocean. Oceans do have waves. Waves do go up, and waves do come down. And it's not our failure or our bad karma. It's just the way things are. And the important thing is not what did I do to deserve this, because we don't know usually, but how can I respond skillfully to turn this difficult situation into something meaningful and take it on the path. Then if we have that attitude, as I said before, it really helps to reduce hope and fear. You know, the hope that everything's going to go right, the fear that it's all going to go wrong. If we develop this inner equanimity and strength, then there's no fear. Whatever happens, we will deal with it. It's very obvious. Sometimes I say that the Dharma is enlightened common sense, because it really is just common sense. When you say it, everybody has to go, yeah, right, you know. It's common sense, but it's uncommon common sense, you know. So it's enlightened common sense. But, you know, most of the Dharma is not a matter of blind faith. I mean, none of the Dharma is a matter of blind faith, but especially, you know, practice is not just believing. Always there are the three levels. First, you hear the Dharma. That means that either you hear it or you study it or whatever. Then one has to go away and think about it. Stop playing on your machine. Yes, concentrate. You have to go away and think about it. You know? It's not a matter of, yes, this has been said, so it must be true and I have to believe it. You read something, you hear something, then you have to go away and think about it. What is its implications? Is this true? Is it not true? I don't understand this, so I'm going to study more on that subject to see if I can clarify for myself what it really means. And so forth. This is a very important part. And then, when we have gained confidence, because we've really thought it through and decided, yes, this makes sense, then we have to become it. We have to practice it. So this is, first you hear it or you study it, and then we go away and think about it. Then we have to meditate on it, meaning not just meditate, sitting, but really incorporate it into our life so that we, as I say, we become it. Only then does it work. If it just stays up in the head, it's a nice idea, but it doesn't change anything. We have to, really, it has to infiltrate the whole body. And then something changes inside. So all these teachings are to help us how to deal with our life in samsara, and then how to transcend it. How to transform samsara into nirvana. Samsara and nirvana are not different things. They are just different ways of seeing the same thing. It's not that we suddenly go woofing off into a different realm. We're here. But we see things how they really are instead of how... I meant to stop and give you a tea break. Nirvana is just samsara seen as it really is, in its empty nature. And so all of these practices are exactly that. They have to be practiced. It's not enough just to intellectually understand, but we have to really put it into practice. And so much of it requires our daily life, so that it's not a matter either of rejecting the daily life. It's a matter of making our daily life into our Dharma practice. Because otherwise, then we just end up feeling very frustrated, or just making excuses not to change, which really is just laziness, you know. It's easier to stay where we are and make excuses why we would change if only. So after the tea break, we will have some questions. Okay, I have these questions, but also if any of you have fresh questions, if you could write them shortly. We will leave some paper here on the desk, and if you just slips of paper, if you want to write questions, please do so and leave them just there. Okay, thank you. So 15 minutes.
Les vamos a pedir de favor que vayan al baño ahora y no cuando toquemos la campana en 15 minutos, porque el break es para ir al baño ahora y así pues hoy estamos cortos de tiempo, así que vayan al baño ahora y después.
There it is. That's it, blue, green. Okay, so before opening the session up for questions, I would just like to let you know about this very unique organization called Sakidita. Sakidita meaning basically daughters of the Buddha, is an international Buddhist women's organization. And it's been going now for many, many years. It's open, of course, to everybody. I mean, you know, gentlemen are also very welcome. But it is focused on Buddhist women. And it is totally non-sectarian. So representatives come from all the traditions, from the Theravadian tradition, from the Mahayana tradition, and the Vajrayana tradition. And everybody is equal. We share our feminine birth and our faith in the Buddha. And what particular form of Buddhism we follow, it is simply not of any relevance. So it meets every 2 years. There are gatherings in various Asian countries. So they have met in, of course, in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Cambodia, Thailand, and Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam, Mongolia. And the next one will be in Indonesia and being held close to the Borobudur stupa, which is the biggest stupa in the world and very extraordinary. And this will be from June 23rd to June 30th this year. And after that, there will be 2 or 3 days of pilgrimage. So anyone who is interested, it's very welcome. It's a very, I don't know how to say, it's a very friendly organization. The nuns and lay women both. And of course, from whichever country it's being held in, then the majority are from that country. There are talks by scholars and practitioners. There are workshops, and there are meditations and rituals in all the different traditions. And in general, it's very nice because whoever is giving the teaching, everybody comes and practices together in that tradition. And so it's an appreciation also of all the different traditions. It's a very, I don't know, it's a very unique conference. I've been to many, many conferences, but I've never been to one like this Sakidita. It's very special. And also because in most Buddhist conferences, you know, the female issue is one of the little side issues which they deal with if they've got time. And here it's the whole of it. You know, it's all Buddhism as it is of interest for women. And so almost all the presenters are females, and we're dealing with subjects which are of interest for us. As I say, this doesn't mean they're not in any way heavy feminists. It's not in any way an anti-male. Uh, Pardon? Sakya, as in Sakyamuni, Sakya, and then Dita, Dhita. Dita. Dita means daughter. We have brochures. So if anyone is interested, genuinely interested, you can take one. You're very welcome. Um, so as I say, everybody's welcome. And it's a very, it's a very unique organization, which deserves to be better known. There are also, groups in America and in Europe and in Asia, etc., that function semi-autonomously and hold meetings and gatherings and so forth. But the big meeting is when everybody comes together every 2 years and just enjoys being with each other and having, as I say, talks and meditations and workshops. The current theme is on social action, I think, isn't it? Social justice. But I mean, the talks are very widespread. But anyway, so anybody who is interested, uh, please consider it. It's a very unique opportunity for Buddhist women to come together and really appreciate each other. And there's some very wonderful women who do come for this. And as I say, gentlemen are very welcome also. It's, as I say, it's not there's no heavy feminist agenda there. Everybody is very open, but it's understanding that normally women get a little bit sidelined, and so here they're center stage. And it's also very moving because in the various countries where we hold the conferences, women come and talk about, the history of the women in that particular country and the struggles they've gone through and their triumphs and their challenges and so forth. And one learns so much about a history which is normally not written about or given any notice of some very, very extraordinary women who have really contributed so much to the Dharma in that country, but are normally not, acknowledged. So yes, so Sakidita, this is for all of you out there, Sakidita. It's even if one cannot go to Indonesia, it's good to get in contact with. They have a website, of course. They have a magazine, and we need lots of women to be interested in what's happening, and gentlemen too, of course. If all life wants to be happy, and mosquitoes are happy sucking blood, but getting bit by mosquitoes makes me unhappy, should I kill mosquitoes? Well, if you do something to make your neighbor unhappy, does your neighbor have the right to come in and kill you? This is the question, I mean, a mosquito's life is very precious for that mosquito. Truly, we don't know how a life for a mosquito is a very fulfilling life. Who are we to judge? And, you know, I mean, I think mosquitoes have Buddha nature. Let us not forget. Buddha nature does not, this primal awareness is not just for humans. All conscious beings have Buddha nature. So right now it may be only a humble mosquito, though to a mosquito its rebirth is not humble. But it's part of the cycle. It's part of samsaric cycle. It will go up. You might go down. When you get reborn as a mosquito, you will be glad that people took a precept not to kill. So, of course, especially in this country where some mosquitoes are transmitting very difficult diseases, we don't encourage mosquitoes to bite us. I mean, sometimes they do, like a lot of forest monks in Thailand, they just sit there meditating and allowing all the mosquitoes, you know, to feed on them, thinking, well, this is wonderful, a little drop of blood and they've got a whole meal. How amazing. May they be well and happy. Of course, they end up with malaria, but but they feel it's worthwhile. You know, I mean, you've fed so many other sentient beings. May they be well and happy. It reminds me of an anecdote of in Dharamshala. There was a retreat up probably in Tushita in the FPMT center, and there were a lot of fleas in the cushions. And so whenever anybody was sitting, they were being bitten by these fleas. And the retreat was being led by this Western nun. So then, as she sat down, she said, "Luncheon is served." The point is to recognize that all beings hold their own life as most precious, as the Buddha said. And we have no right to think we have the right just to squat something because it's inconvenient to us. That little bite and that whole being's life is finished. So rather than that, we don't have a right just to kill because something displeases us. Wear mosquito repellent. Blow it off. You know. You know, I mean, we don't have to just kill it. And so that respect, it's based on a respect. You see, the idea that if something inconveniences me, I can kill it, it's based on our ego-clinging mind, our self-cherishing mind, that we're only thinking from our point of view. And, you know, this is directly contravenes the whole idea of loving kindness, compassion, empathy with all beings. So it would be much more sensible, rather than create the karma of killing and taking the life of a sentient being, that we, you know, just, you know, encourage it to go away and wear mosquito repellent. Come on. How to struggle against false tranquility or sinking and sleepiness when we do shamatha. Do we stop the meditation, wash the face and continue? Well, usually if one finds one is sinking, then of course the idea of you know, when the mind becomes kind of dull, the idea is to sharpen the mind. So therefore sit up more straight, open the eyes, and really try to, at that time, tighten the concentration. If that doesn't work and one is in a situation where one can do so, then one could get up and splash the face with cold water, go outside, look at the sky, get the mind open and awake. I mean, this is the point. So anything that we can do to wake ourselves up rather than allow ourselves to slip deeper and deeper into this dullness state is a good thing. And this is why I shared the anecdote about sitting on the edge of a well, etc. It's the idea again was that you are definitely wide awake when you're sitting on the edge of a well, and so anything which works to keep. I mean, if one finds that when one starts to meditate, one starts to fall asleep, I would suggest it means that you haven't had enough sleep. And that the body is saying, oh, thank goodness, now I can just go. So make sure that one has had sufficient sleep. I mean, if you're up to 2 o'clock in the morning and then you hope to get up at 5 o'clock and meditate, it's a little optimistic. So it's much better to get adequate sleep so that when one does do practice, the body isn't thinking, oh good, this is a good excuse to go back to sleep again. So, I mean, one has to be sensible. You said samsara has nothing to do with karma. Who said samsara has nothing to do with karma? Isn't everything cause and effect? Absolutely. Did I say samsara has nothing to do with karma? I don't remember ever saying that. How could I say that? Samsara is caused by our karma. It's frightening what people hear. It was a Spanish translation, that's what it was. Of course, no, there was a complete misunderstanding. I don't know what they heard.
Misunderstanding from yesterday that the way the world works,
Mm.
that this is just what it is.
Yes.
Someone you see, but of course there's karma.
Yes, and the Buddha said that the whole of the cosmos is created by the karma of the beings inhabiting that cosmos, not just human beings, all beings. That moment to moment to moment, due to causes and effects, and the karma that allows us to perceive things the way that we do, that we are moment to moment to moment creating our whole cosmos. So karma is an extraordinarily important part. It underlies everything. Goodness me. No, that's all in Spanish. You see, it was all the mistake was in Spanish, obviously. I read that one. What is the difference between evaluating the thoughts, alertness, and judging them? What we're trying to do when we are, there are two things here. When we are simply during formal practice watching the thoughts, observing the thoughts, then we should not evaluate them or judge them. We just see them as thoughts. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, high thoughts, low thoughts, that's just all thoughts. It's just bubbles, I mean, we are not evaluating them, we are not judging them. But during the day, when we are being more aware of our thoughts, that time we should evaluate them. And that means we should see whether they are from negative roots or from positive roots. Because the negative roots are what causes our dukkha. They cause the turbulence of the mind, is our greed and our aggression and, our envy and fears and grasping mind. This, as we begin to recognize the kind of feeling tones in our mind, we recognize that really it's true. These negative emotions are what's causing the problem. And that, therefore, once we recognize that and see that in the mind, we stop blaming other people. We stop blaming outer circumstances, and we look at our own mind and what is our own mind at this moment? What is the feeling tone there? What is the emotional basis of our thinking? And when we recognize that this is based on negative roots, then accepting that, we can make the choice to change that, not to fuel it more, not to keep following that and adding on more and more and more. At this point, we can stop and say, okay, that's a negative root. Now I will replace that with something more positive. What shall we do? And deciding how to deal with that is up to us. But, there are many things that we can do for replacing, the root of anger and aggression, or the root of greed and grasping and so forth. And so in that way we are judging our mind. We are judging, this is a good thought, that is a bad thought. Okay, I'm going to replace anger with patience or with loving kindness or compassion. I'm going, instead of being so greedy and grasping, I'm going to replace that by being more generous and open-handed, open-hearted, and so forth. So if I'm, instead of being jealous, I'm going to rejoice in other people's happiness, and so forth. So this is a judgment, because in all Buddhist schools, we are trying to transform our mind from the negative, pull out the weeds and replant it with beautiful plants. That's what we're trying to do. All the Buddhist methods of practice are basically to transform the mind. This is our ordinary conceptual mind, but what we are trying, the good point, which we have to understand, is that thoughts and emotions which are connected to love, to compassion, to kindness, to understanding, to patience, and all these positive qualities are reflections and rooted in our genuine nature. They are part of our Buddha nature. Buddha nature is not just empty, it is also highly cognizant and filled with all these positive qualities. Our anger, greed, self-grasping mind, our jealousies, and our pride, these are called adventitious. I don't know what that is in Spanish, but adventitious, adventitio. Anyway, it means they come from outside, they are temporary, they are not our true nature. They are the tarnish around the silver pot. Right? The silver pot is always silver pot, but if it gets tarnished, when we look at it, it looks black. But that black is not inherent to the silver pot. We can polish it, and then the silver is still silver. It's never been polluted by that tarnish. So when we look at the mind and we see all these negative emotions, we have to remember that this is not our true nature, and it therefore can be removed. If it was our true nature, we could never remove it. We are all sinners. But we are not sinners, we are Buddhas. And so these negative qualities can be removed. And and we can get back to the shining silver of our true nature. So this is why it's important to recognize those qualities in our mind which are negative and deal with them and replace them with something positive, because as we do that more and more, then we come closer and closer to our true nature. Okay? Does karma is one of the mind tricks of the mind, ego? Yes. Well, I'm not quite sure what it means, but I guess it says, is karma one of the mind tricks of the ego? The point is that karma. Can I have your mala? Somebody, a Burmese monk, described it very well. Every action, every intentional action of body, speech, and mind creates a karma, which, according to the Yogacara school, is then embedded in our eighth consciousness, the alaya vijnana. Okay. So all these little beads are karmas. Karma means action, right? So these are our little karmas. And so, therefore, if I pull one bead, all the other beads come with it, right? It's endless. It just goes round and round and round and round. We never can get away from the beads. Just one bead and all the other beads go. But what is holding these beads together? That happens, that we pull one bead and all the other beads follow, is the thread. And the thread is the belief in an agent who committed those karmas. In other words, the ego. So, cut the thread, you pull one thing, the other beads don't follow. You understand? So, therefore, karma is created by the ego. As long as we believe that someone committed something, I did this, this was me, we are trapped in samsara. Once we recognize that since the very beginning there is no one to have committed anything, that everything inherently is empty, cut. Right? You understand? That is why there is a liberation from samsara. Otherwise there would be no hope, because we would just go round and round and round and round forever. Once we have a definitive recognition that the ego is just a fabrication of the mind and it doesn't exist as an entity from its own side, once we experience that, not just think about it, but experience it, then it cuts. Oh, another karma. In karma, when I do some negative action, one effect is that I'll experience the same negative action, so the karma will never end. Because to purify, I will need the conditions that would involve other people. So the people will need other conditions, people, to purify negative karma. What? Sorry, I have to work this one out. In karma, when I do some negative action, one effect is that I will experience the same negative action. So the karma will never end. No, that's not true. Because although we will receive some result, which is not exactly the same, but depending, some result will come. How we then respond to that will be creating the future karma. So, for example, if we have in past, killed many animals, then it could be that in the next, at some point, that we will suffer maybe from ill health or a short lifespan and so forth. But if it's ill health, then how we respond to the ill health will be creating our future karma, right? So if we, for example, we get sick and instead of feeling sorry for ourselves, we do tonglen, then that has taken what would otherwise be a very negative karmic result and turned it into a positive karma, right? So it's not all, and it's not, unfortunately, the way that karma is presented, it's very, you do this, you'll get that, you'll do this, you'll get that, which of course is very simplistic. One time, Ananda, who was the Buddha's cousin and his attendant, he said to the Buddha, well, you know, karma is very complicated, but I think I've got it. And the Buddha said, oh no, Ananda, don't say that. Only a Buddha can understand karma. Because moment to moment, we are creating karma, even not just our actions and our speech, but in our thinking. How can we say this is going to result in that, this is going to result in that? It's not like that. You know, it's so complicated that even a computer would die of despair. How can we? It's literally beyond thought. We cannot understand. This is why they simplify it. Don't do this and do that, etc., with lots and lots of threats about all the horrible things you do if you go wrong. But that's really only to frighten people into being good, you know, as in the Catholic Church or in any, you know, religious organization. The idea is that if you frighten people with the horrible results of their actions, then they'll be good. Of course, it doesn't work because the good people get all paranoid and the bad people could care less. And so it really only punishes the people who don't deserve punishment. But still, always there is this idea of simplifying everything. This is, you know, is going to result in this. But actually, it's a very, very complex system, and we cannot possibly know. But what we do know is that actions of body, speech, and mind, in which the fundamental intention is based on negative roots, not the justification which we give to ourselves for our actions, but the real underlying reason for our actions, our real intentions. That if they are based on negative roots, they will have negative results. If they're based on positive roots, they will have positive results. Whatever that means, we can rely on that. And for that reason, we should also examine our mind to make sure that, you know, what we say, what we do is based on very positive thoughts for the welfare of all beings and not just our own selfish self-concerns. I don't know is the answer to this one. How can you help someone who is deeply depressed and unfocused at a level that is unable to take care of her daily routine? You know, this is a huge problem in the world today, especially. The level of affluence and the level of deep depression. It's very interesting. I mean, often people in very challenging circumstances of great poverty and real need, they often are not depressed. They actually, if you meet them, they're, you know, okay. And some of them are downright cheerful. But as we become more affluent, somehow it gives, I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure psychologists could say. But the rise of suicide, for example, in affluent society, this utter despair that life is not even worth living. I mean, two of the high suicide countries in the world are New Zealand and Japan. I mean, why? So this is a huge problem which we are facing in this world, and I don't say that, you know, meditation is the answer. I think for many people it could make you feel worse. Some people could be helped through psychological means. Some could be helped sometimes with medication. Some it doesn't help. And how we can help people in these very deep levels of despair and depression, honestly, I don't know. I mean, if I knew, I really, you know, we could, you know, it would be a wonderful thing. I would talk about it constantly. But I don't know. And I mean, I know people who are in that state, and I don't know how to help. They have been to psychiatrists. They are long-term practitioners. They have, you know, undergone, they're on medication, they've undergone, you know, a lot of therapy, even electric shocks, treatment, or everything they can think of. And yet, you know, it's a psychological state where there's just this thick black cloud of depression that you can't even function. And how to dispel the clouds, I don't know. I truly don't. No. Sorry, I can't give any advice. I mean, everything would just be a cliche because truly I don't know anything that anyone's come up with yet that really can help at this very deep level of total despair. Could you give references on good books about Lojong? Oh, nowadays there are so many books on Lojong. Lojong is this mind training which was introduced into Tibet by Palda in the 10th, 11th century and was continued by what are called the Kadampa Geshes. Now, the Kadampa Geshes were a very wonderful group. Of course, Tsongkhapa himself took the Kadampa tradition and evolved it into the Gelugpa tradition. But Milarepa's chief disciple, Gampopa, himself was a Kadampa monk and combined the Kadampa teachings with the yogas were taught to him by Milarepa to create the Kalgyupa tradition. The Sakyapas likewise take on board the Lojong teachings and do the Nyingmapas. So this is these Lojong teachings encompass everybody. When we talk about the Kadampa, Sunma Elin here keeps reminding me, I must say this does not mean the new Kadampa. I hear that there are no new Kadampas here in Puerto Rico. You are very fortunate. Should they ever come, please avoid them. I would never say this about any tradition, but I say this about the new Kadampa. They are evil. And they are completely in the power of a very low and malignant spirit, totally opposed to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And His Holiness always asks anyone who practices in this tradition or practices this protector not to come anywhere near him or to attend his teachings. So I'm not making this up. So if any new Kadampa group come to Puerto Rico, please avoid them like anything. They are really, the people of course who join are very innocent. They don't understand how they're being manipulated but it's a very negative organization, unfortunately. So when I talk about Kadampa, I mean the early Kadampa, who were fantastic, not this new Kadampa, right? So books on Lojong, there are so many nowadays. There is there are books which the main Kadampa texts are, and then you can look it up, right? Because there are many translations and commentaries. The main Kadampa texts are the 37 practices of a bodhisattva by who? Tomne Sambodh. No. Who? Tommy Samu. Yes. Sorry, I haven't even given talk on this. I can't even remember who gave it. Yes. So anyway, the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, and the 8 verses of mind training, and a 7-point mind training. Geshe, my mind is completely gone. Yes, Langri Tampa was the 8 verses, and the 7-point mind training was by Chekawa. No? Anyway, the Tutan Zimpa, who is the translator, the main translator for the Dalai Lama, has basically translated all the Lojong texts of the Kadampas. It's in a thick book. But that's a little heavy. It's better to start with these basic, very popular texts first. They have been translated again and again and commented on by various schools of thought. But the one is on the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, I think is, what's it called? Yeah, is it Enlightened Courage or the other one? Yeah, Diggokensis, what is, not Enlightened Courage, that's the other one. What's it called? Something of the Enlightened Ones. Heart Teaching, Heart Treasure of the Enlightened Ones by Diggokensi Rinpoche, which is a commentary on the 37 ways of a Bodhisattva. That's very beautiful. Pema Children and Alan Wallace and Geshe Sonam Rinchen and many Geshes, and also the Nyingma Kempos and so forth. This is why I'm not giving you any particular authors. There are many. Nowadays, Lojong. There is even a commentary from a Zen master. Everybody's commenting on Lojong nowadays. Yeah, there are many. If you looked up Lojong, you would find also on mind training. You would find so many. And they're all good. It's not that there's any that you would say, no, don't read that. You know, they come from different angles, but they are all very, very helpful and beautiful for the mind. Somebody could. Yeah. Could you please tell me what this means and what this says and what it means? It says Droma Dorje. From. Offered by Doma Dorje. It says. Okay? That's what it says. It's in Tibetan. It says offered by Doma Dorje. If that means anything to anybody. No. It says, can you give us a brief summary of those 12 years in the cave? Well, a brief summary was I went in, I stayed for 12 years, and then I came out. I think that's it. So we'll answer a few more of these. Oh, I think this was the one that you were asking the other day. I recognize that one. Okay, well, how about, is it necessary to be a male in order to achieve Buddhahood? Well, I have asked the heads of lineages on this one. And one of the heads of a lineage, I won't say who, said up until the last millisecond you can have a female body, but at the last millisecond you have to transform into a male body. So I said, why? We all have heads and arms and legs. What is it about the male body which is essential in order to attain Buddhahood? He wouldn't answer. Others point out, I remember asking another High Lama, can women, I went with the daughter of another High Lama, and we asked together, can women attain enlightenment? And he said, yes, of course. And then the Kempo beside him went, Rinpoche. Oh, well, maybe not. I have given up the argument with Tibetans on this subject because they say, well, it says in the text that only males can get enlightened. So I said, who wrote the texts? I now no longer argue anymore because you can't argue. I say, fair enough, you become a Buddha, that's fine.